So this is the fourth episode of the Alone Short podcast. Such an amazing sentence to say. In this specific video, I will be talking about life in general. As you know, that this is the Alone Short podcast. The reason why it's short because I cannot upload long videos. The reason why it's alone because I'm alone. And the reason why it's a podcast because it's unedited and unscripted. So let's talk about life for a second. So in the last year or so, I was meditating on a thought that I guess it's pretty interesting and it deserves to be heard by the world. I don't know if I actually should say this or not, but it was a thought that I was meditating on. It consists of we are part of a very long history. So the thought was in my head that I am part of so many people in history that I'm not any different. So what we think makes us different is what makes us not different than the others, right? So I was thinking with myself and I was meditating on this thought and how there's billions and billions of people before us. Each one of them had a dream. Each one of them has his own troubles, his own tasks, his own dreams, his own mind, his own group, his own circle. Probably each one of them thought that he was special and he was very exceptional, right? And he was unique. Yet, when you think, that uniqueness get vanished when you see it from the larger scale. It's like, yes, there's billions of people. Yeah, they're all the same, right? Still, it seems the same. And once you zoom in, there is differences. Oh, there's a lot of differences. Each one of them is different. So, for me, it was more of a coping mechanism that I don't suggest, right? But yet, maybe it works for someone out there. So for me, when I had something that I was about to have, right? Let's say as an example, an exam, right? It's an example for educational purposes. So let's say we have an exam, and I'm stressed, I'm afraid. All of the things that comes with the exam. And for me, the night before, I said to myself, hey, there's probably millions and millions of people that are in the same situations as here right now. They're passing the exam, they're stressed. What makes you so different? Nothing. There's millions of people around the world in this exact moment that are passing an exam. So don't give it more than it's worth. For me, that's how I saw it, right? When I was doing, let's say a presentation as an example, I said to myself, hey, it's a normal human I'm dealing with, right? I'm entering a class, I'm a normal human having a normal life with normal people, doing normal things. I'm getting into this normal class in normal school with normal people, living a normal life, having normal thoughts, normal things, doing normal tasks, right? And yes, there is a normal teacher that is doing a normal job. And yes, he tries to explain to me something, and I try to get it. And at the end, he gives me a few questions to see if I understood the things that he was trying to explain, and I try to convince him that yes, I do understand what you're saying. I do understand what you were explaining. That's how I saw it, right? And I think it might help a lot of people out there that are maybe going through exams period, and you're having that overwhelming stress and anxiety about the exams. Like it's so big of a deal, and yes, it's good to think about this, right? It doesn't mean necessarily to not prepare for your exams. Now prepare for your exams, of course. Yet it might help, right? So it's an interesting thought. There's another thought that I would be talking about here, which is the 80-20% rule. I think everyone knows this at this point. It's like 20% of your work gives you 80% of your results. So there is a question that was constantly proposing itself to my mind, which is, so let's say there's 80-20% rule, right? 20% gives the 80%. So what if that 20% also the 20% of the 20% give 80% of the 20% work, which is 80% of the total work. If you do this, multiple times, we end up by something that is very small, right? So it's like few percentage. So does this mean that the entire rule is false? Well, maybe, right? Because it can be just a marketing strategy. Because yes, it sounds very cool. Hey, just 20% of your work gives you 80% of your results. Don't do that 80%, do just 20%. It's great, yes, I want to do this. Right? It feels like a shortcut, like, yes, I want to do this, give me. What is the 20% that I can get 80% of the results in? And guess what? I'm gonna do it 5 times so we can get even more results, right? So it's like 400% results. Well, it's not the case. It's like you gotta do the 100% work for you to get that 80-20%, right? Because otherwise it cannot be true. It will never be true. You cannot do. So let's say if you apply this in your life and you do the 20-80% rule, right? And you don't do the 80%, you won't get the 80% of the results, right? Because even if it seems that it doesn't have so much value in the results, but it has a hand on there. So yeah, you can just take one thing from nature, right? It's all connected, as Darwin. No, it's not Darwin. I'm sorry. As Da Vinci said, it's learn how everything is connected to everything else. It's pretty good, right? Yeah, it's a very good quote from Da Vinci. Talking about Da Vinci, actually. So Da Vinci, one of the greatest, let's say, artists in history of humanity. And one thing that is pretty interesting about the public figures that we still know about after thousands of years, after hundreds of years, so did they do something that is very special and exceptional to the point that we still hear about them till this day? Or was it something else? Was it like storytelling? Someone who tells us a good story. I mean, we've all experienced this before. It's like something happens, there's few people that experience that, yet each one of them tells the story in a different way. It remains the same story, but just the techniques of the story. Someone makes it in a good sound, someone makes it in a good posture and body language, someone makes it, make you like, hey, this is how I feel. Oh, look, when I said it to my parents, they were so gassed about it. It gives you those interesting things. It's like commercials. And what if it was just the same? Like, those personal figures. They just had a good story. Or they just had a good story to tell. Or they just knew how to tell a story. And I think, actually, I've heard this before. Now that I'm thinking, I remember this. Probably it was Steve Jobs' quote that he says, I actually don't know if this is true or not, right? So I'm not gonna give you something that is false. But I guess that there is something about Apple and Steve Jobs about the story that they tell. So what makes Apple Apple? What makes Apple so good of a company? It's not its product, but it's the marketing and the story behind it. Right? So it's like there is a 1,000 music in your songs in your pocket, or whatever it may be. Or I think even with the larger brands right now, it's like just do it. just do it. It's Nike. So that's also another story to tell, right? And also with McDonald's as well, I guess, right? It's like how McDonald's went from, this place to this place, and it's the same thing repeatedly repeating constantly. It's like even Elon Musk, which is, somewhat of a personal figure right now, public figure, he has a story to tell. It's like, hey, here's, he was there, he did this and he did this, and look at him now. So it's like, that transformation. Once you think at it from another point, is that everyone has a story. It's like everyone, literally everyone. And I can give you one of the examples that I always do grocery shopping, right? I'm the responsible for grocery shopping. So I go do grocery shopping from this man, and he always had good stories to tell. There are definitely, some sort of, it's not a dad joke, but they're somewhat of a generational jokes, I would say. And they're not jokes, they're stories. Because he says, hey, look, here's the difference between your generation and my generation. You want to know? Hear this. And hear this. And hear this. Sometimes he's right. Sometimes maybe I disagree with him. And, maybe I don't tell him. I say, yes, of course. As long as he's given me my grocery that I need to get back to the house. But yes, it means that everyone has a story, but just some people tells the story in a better way that delivers it into more people. And at the end of the day, as the quote from National Geographic is that everyone is making a story because you don't remember people as you remember stories. Yes, it's true. We remember stories. When you hear about someone, you never hear about, hey, look, as in the objective standpoint, it's always subjective. It's always a story. It's always, hey, look, he was there, he got there, he did this. Or maybe it's in a different narrative, right? It's like, oh, look at this person. He's this. Well, it's not what you think. He has gone through this. Now he's this. So those transformational stories is all what we hear whenever we hear about someone or something. It makes our brain think. Is that are the stories what makes humans so popular amongst societies? And more essential is, are the stories responsible for us remembering those people? It's like Da Vinci as an example. There is a story behind it. It's not like, yes, he had good drawings, but there is a story behind it. So that story that people can tell, it's like, hey, he was doing this, he was so good of an artist. Or, as an example, there is Newton. Yes, he didn't invent, but he found gravity, right? Let's state it at that. So I wouldn't say that it would be so interesting of a story or a person if it wasn't for the story about him, which is, yes, he was on a tree and an apple fell off, which is, by the way, I think it's false. It's not true. I read this somewhere. I don't remember where, but I think it's not even true. It's storytelling, right? I'm not sure. You can look it up. So I'm gonna clear my hands here. But the thing is that there is a story behind it, and there is a reason why all of the kids in the kids' channels have stories and stories, and they like reading stories because us humans can relate to stories more than anything else. I don't know. Maybe it's just a thought. Maybe it's a theory. Who knows? But yes, the idea of this podcast is us discussing something. So if you have an opinion about this, if you have another ideas about this subject, please let me know in the comments, and I will make sure to reply to you in the comments. If it was somewhat needs a long explanation, I'll make sure that I will make a video about it. levels. And always focus on your mastery. Heal, inspire, and teach. See you in the next one.